The grand ballroom of the Rossi estate fell silent as Elena wheeled herself to the center of the room. The dangerous men who surrounded the table, captains of Victor Rossi's criminal empire, watched her with expressions ranging from respect to barely concealed resentment. "Gentlemen," Elena's voice carried clearly through the hushed room, "I've reviewed your proposal for the waterfront acquisition. My answer is no." Nikolai Volkov, Victor's lieutenant for over 15 years, slammed his fist on the polished table. "With all due respect, Mrs. Rossi, this isn't a decision for you to make. This is business. Our business." His scarred face twisted into a sneer as his eyes flickered deliberately to her wheelchair. Elena's gaze remained steady, unintimidated. "Any business involving my husband involves me, Mr. Volkov, and I won't approve expansion through intimidation and violence when legitimate means are available." Victor Rossi, seated at the head of the table, watched the exchange silently, his dark eyes revealing nothing. Nikolai leaned forward. "The Rossi empire wasn't built on legitimate means, Mrs. Rossi. It was built on blood and fear, something you seem eager to forget." Elena wheeled closer to the table, her sapphire ring catching the light. "I forget nothing, Nikolai, but the future doesn't have to mirror the past." Just as Nikolai opened his mouth to retort, Elena raised her hand. "The decision is final. We'll acquire the property through our real estate holdings, and we'll pay fair market value. This isn't a discussion." The silence that followed was electric. Then Victor spoke, his deep voice quiet yet commanding instant attention. "You heard my wife." Meeting adjourned. As the men filed out, muttering among themselves, Nikolai lingered, his eyes meeting Victor's in silent challenge before finally departing. Elena exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. 2 years had passed since that fateful day at the church. 2 years since Elena had discovered that Victor Rossi, the most feared man in the city, had been her childhood protector at St. Catherine's Orphanage. 2 years since she'd learned he had orchestrated much of her adult life from the shadows, ensuring she had opportunities while keeping his distance. Their unlikely reunion had blossomed into a partnership neither had anticipated. Their wedding, 6 months after the church incident, had been small but meaningful, with Nikolai standing as Victor's best man and Sophia, Victor's longtime housekeeper, accompanying Elena down the aisle. The sprawling Rossi estate, once feeling like a prison to Elena, had become home. The wheelchair accommodations that had initially surprised her, the ramps alongside stairs, the wide hallways, the accessible bathrooms, were now simply part of daily life. Victor had designed them years ago, she learned, always hoping she might someday be there. In those early days, Elena had struggled to find her place. Wife to a mafia boss wasn't a role anyone prepared for. Victor had tried to shield her from his business dealings, but Elena refused to live in ignorance. If she was to be his wife, she insisted on knowing the truth, all of it. That insistence had led to countless late-night conversations, Victor reluctantly revealing the extent of his criminal empire, the protection rackets, the gambling operations, the weapons dealing, the occasional violence necessary to maintain order. He expected her disgust, her rejection. Instead, Elena surprised him with understanding. Not approval, never that, but comprehension of how an orphaned boy could be molded into this man. And with understanding came her gentle but persistent push toward legitimacy. "You built all this to protect me," she told him one night as they lay in bed, her head on his chest. "But what good is protection if it comes at the cost of your soul?" That question had planted a seed in Victor's mind. A seed that Elena had carefully nurtured over the months that followed. Now, as Elena wheeled herself into Victor's office after the tense meeting with his captains, she knew that seed had begun to take root, but not everyone was happy about the resulting growth. "That went well," she remarked dryly, closing the door behind her. Victor looked up from the papers on his desk, the hint of a smile touching his lips. "You handled Nikolai better than I could have." "He hates me," Elena observed, moving to take her place across from Victor's desk. "He fears you," Victor corrected. "He fears what you represent. Change." Elena sighed, running her fingers through her dark hair. "Change is necessary, Victor. Your empire can't continue as it has been. Not if you want a real future. Not if WE want a real future." Victor's eyes softened as they always did when she spoke of their future together. "I know, but decades of operation don't transform overnight. Nikolai and the others, this life is all they know." "Then we help them learn something new," Elena said simply, starting with the St. Catherine's project. At the mention of the orphanage where they'd both grown up, Victor's expression grew guarded. "What have you found?" Elena's eyes lit with determination. "Something that will change everything." The St. Catherine's project had begun innocently enough. 3 months after their wedding, Elena had expressed interest in charitable work, something to give meaning to her days beyond being Victor Rossi's wife. "I want to help children like us," she'd told Victor over dinner. "Orphans, especially those with disabilities. The system failed both of us in different ways." Victor had supported her initiative, providing funds without question, though he'd been reluctant when she specifically mentioned St. Catherine's Orphanage. That place holds nothing but darkness, he'd warned. But Elena had been persistent. Then let's bring some light to it. Now, in Victor's office, Elena pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on the desk between them. Financial records from St. Catherine's for the past 5 years, she explained. Official ones and unofficial ones. Victor raised an eyebrow. How did you get these? Isabella Moretti helped me, Elena replied, watching Victor's reaction carefully. His jaw tightened at the name. The Moretti family has been our enemy for generations. Isabella isn't like her father, Elena countered. She's a lawyer, committed to children's rights, and she has resources I need. Victor opened the folder, his expression darkening as he reviewed the contents. Double bookkeeping, large cash deposits from unmarked sources. He looked up sharply. Human trafficking? Elena nodded grimly. Children, specifically, children with no family connections who won't be missed, just like you were targeted by Kuzman all those years ago. Victor rose from his desk, moving to the window. The tension in his shoulders was visible even under his tailored suit. Father Mayle is long dead. Who's running this operation now? Judge Malcolm Hawthorne oversees the orphanage board, Elena replied, and the financial backing comes from Damian Fletcher. Victor turned, his expression hardening to stone. Damian Fletcher? The same man who received the Humanitarian of the Year award last month. The very same, Elena confirmed. His construction companies are fronts for money laundering, and he uses the orphanage network to traffic children for labor, sometimes worse. Victor's hands clenched into fists, and Judge Hawthorne ensures any legal issues disappear. His voice had taken on the dangerous edge that Elena had come to recognize, the voice of the mafia boss, not her husband. Victor, she said gently, we need to be careful. These are powerful men. A cold smile curved his lips. So am I. Elena wheeled closer to him. I don't want blood on our hands. There's a better way. What do you suggest? He asked, though his tone suggested he already had his own solution in mind. Evidence, Elena said firmly. Enough to expose them publicly, to ensure they face justice in court. No disappearances, no mysterious accidents. Victor studied her for a long moment. That kind of evidence is difficult to obtain through legal channels. Then we use other channels, Elena replied. But we do it right. This isn't about revenge, Victor. It's about justice for those children. Something shifted in Victor's expression. Pride, perhaps, mixed with reluctant agreement. You've changed, Elena. The girl I knew at St. Catherine's would never have suggested bending the law. The girl you knew didn't have a criminal mastermind for a husband, she countered with a small smile. Besides, I learned from the best how to protect what matters. Later that evening, Elena met with Isabella Moretti in the garden pavilion of the Rossi estate. The security measures had been doubled since Elena had begun her investigation, with armed guards patrolling the perimeter and cameras monitoring every approach. Isabella Moretti was everything her father wasn't: ethical, compassionate, committed to using her family's resources for good. She distanced herself from her family's criminal enterprises, building her own reputation as a formidable attorney specializing in family law. Your husband's men searched me thoroughly before letting me onto the property, Isabella remarked, settling into a chair across from Elena. I'm surprised he allowed this meeting at all, given our family's history. Victor is evolving, Elena replied diplomatically. He understands this is important. Isabella nodded, opening her briefcase. I've been looking into Judge Hawthorne's case history. Every time St. Catherine's faces an inspection or complaint, it lands on his docket, always with the same result: case dismissed. Too convenient to be coincidence, Elena observed. Exactly. And look at this. Isabella passed over a document. 3 years ago, a social worker filed a report after noticing several children had disappeared from the orphanage records. She was found dead 2 days later. Apparent suicide. Elena felt a chill run through her. They killed her, almost certainly, but they were careful. The police report is thorough, and Detective James Wilson signed off on the suicide ruling. Isabella paused. Wilson was later promoted to chief of the downtown precinct, a position that came with a surprising salary increase. They're buying police protection too, Elena murmured. Isabella leaned forward. This goes beyond St. Catherine's, Elena. I think we're looking at a network that spans the city. Judges, police, businessmen, all profiting from exploiting these children. Elena's grip tightened on the arms of her wheelchair. Then we need someone inside the police who isn't corrupt, someone who can help us gather evidence legally. I might know someone, Isabella said thoughtfully. Marcus Graves. He was a detective until he was forced into early retirement after challenging Wilson on a case. He has a reputation for integrity, even when it cost him professionally. Can we trust him? More than most, Isabella replied. And he has nothing to lose. The system already took everything from him. Elena nodded decisively. Set up a meeting. But don't tell him who I am yet. Let's see what kind of man he is first. As Isabella gathered her documents, she hesitated. Elena, your husband, how much does he know about what you're doing? Everything, Elena answered without hesitation. We don't keep secrets from each other. And he's really willing to pursue this legally? No? Alternative solutions? Isabella's tone made clear what she meant. Elena met her gaze steadily. Victor has agreed to follow my lead on this. We're going to expose these men, not eliminate them. Isabella looked skeptical. The Victor Rossi I've heard about doesn't show such restraint. Then perhaps you don't know him as well as you think, Elena replied softly. People can change when given reason to. Later that night, as Elena prepared for bed, Victor watched her from the doorway of their bedroom. She could feel his gaze as she transferred from her wheelchair to the bed, a routine she had mastered long ago. You're planning something, he observed, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. Elena looked up, meeting his dark eyes. Isabella knows a former detective who might help us, someone honest. Victor's expression remained neutral, but Elena knew him well enough to sense his displeasure. Bringing in outsiders is risky. So is going against men like Hawthorne and Fletcher without legal backing, she countered. We need evidence that will stand up in court. Victor moved into the room, sitting on the edge of the bed beside her. You truly believe the system will deliver justice? The same system that allowed St. Catherine's to operate as it has for decades? Elena reached for his hand, her fingers tracing the small scars that marked his knuckles. I believe we have to try, for the children still there, and for the children we once were. Victor's eyes softened, and he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. You always see the best possible outcome. It's what I love about you, and what terrifies me. I know the risks, Elena assured him, but this is important, Victor, not just for those children, but for us, for the future we're trying to build. What do you mean? Elena took a deep breath. If we're ever going to truly leave the criminal world behind, if we're ever going to have a family of our own, we need to start building a legacy we can be proud of. Victor went very still, his eyes searching hers. A family? The vulnerability in his voice made her heart ache. For all his power, for all the fear he commanded, Victor Rossi had never dared to dream of normal happiness. Someday, she said softly, when we're ready, when your business is legitimate enough that our children won't grow up in the shadow of violence. Victor was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I never thought such a future was possible, not for someone like me. It is possible, Elena insisted, but we have to start making different choices now, beginning with St. Catherine's. Victor nodded slowly, decision settling in his eyes. All right, we'll try your way. But Elena, his voice hardened slightly, if these men threaten you, if they come after you, all bets are off. I won't lose you, not to anyone. The fierce protectiveness in his voice reminded Elena of the boy who had stood up to Father Mail all those years ago, threatening to burn down St. Catherine's if any harm came to her. Some things never changed. We'll be careful, she promised, and we'll do this together. But even as Victor pulled her close, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping onto a dangerous path, one that would test not only their love but the very foundation of everything Victor had built. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Rossi estate's East Wing dining room as Elena reviewed the dossier Isabella had prepared on Marcus Graves, 55 years old, 20 years on the force before his forced retirement, divorced, one daughter in college. His record showed commendations for bravery followed by a series of demotions after he began questioning certain case closures. He looks like exactly what we need, Elena murmured, closing the file as Sophia served breakfast. You're meeting him today? Victor asked, not looking up from his newspaper. At Isabella's office, neutral territory. Victor folded his paper, fixing her with a serious gaze. Take Marco with you. Victor, non-negotiable, he interrupted firmly. Marco stays in the car, out of sight, but he's there if you need him. Elena sighed but nodded her agreement. Victor's protective instincts were deeply ingrained, and she had learned to choose her battles. This wasn't one worth fighting. There's something else we should discuss, Victor said, his tone shifting to business. Nikolai came to me last night with concerns about your involvement in operations. Elena set down her coffee cup. What kind of concerns? He believes you're pushing too hard too fast for legitimacy. He says the men are questioning my leadership, wondering if I've gone soft. And what did you tell him? Victor's expression hardened. I reminded him who gives the orders. Elena studied her husband's face, noting the tension around his eyes. He's been with you a long time, hasn't he? Since I was 17, Victor confirmed. He was Kuzman's right hand before mine. He taught me how to survive in this world. And now he thinks I'm threatening that world, Elena observed quietly. Victor didn't deny it. Change is difficult for men like Nikolai. They understand power and fear. Business licenses and corporate acquisitions don't inspire the same loyalty, or the same terror, Elena added pointedly. A ghost of a smile touched Victor's lips. Precisely. Elena pushed her plate away, suddenly not hungry. I'm not trying to dismantle your organization, Victor. I'm trying to transform it into something that won't end with you in prison or dead. I know, Victor said gently, but not everyone sees it that way. Nikolai, Antonio Reyes, Dmitry Zolotov, the old guard, they see your influence as weakness. And you? Do you see it that way too sometimes? The question hung between them, heavier than Elena had intended. Victor reached across the table, taking her hand. Never. You are my strength, Elena, not my weakness. But I need to manage these transitions carefully. The loyalty of my captains is essential, especially now that we're moving against Hawthorne and Fletcher. Elena understood the unspoken warning. Victor was balancing on a knife's edge, supporting her initiatives while maintaining control over men who had been trained in violence and intimidation, not corporate governance. Let me speak with Nikolai, she suggested. Maybe if he understands why this matters to me, to us, he'll be more supportive. Victor looked skeptical. Nikolai isn't known for his empathy. Neither were you once, Elena reminded him with a small smile. Yet here we are. Later that morning, Marco drove Elena to Isabella's downtown office in one of Victor's armored SUVs. As agreed, he remained with the vehicle while Elena made her way to the sleek office building that housed Moretti Legal Services. Isabella was waiting in the lobby, her elegant suit and confident demeanor marking her as a woman accustomed to power in her own right. He's already here, she said by way of greeting. Arrived early, very punctual. What did you tell him about me? Elena asked as they entered the elevator. Only that you represent a private foundation interested in investigating irregularities at St. Catherine's, Isabella replied. Nothing about your personal connection or your husband. Elena nodded her approval. Let's see what he's made of before we reveal everything. Marcus Graves was not what Elena had expected. Rather than the hardened ex-cop she had imagined, he was a tired-looking man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He rose when Isabella showed Elena into the conference room, his gaze flickering briefly to her wheelchair before meeting her eyes with professional courtesy. Ms. Moretti says you're interested in St. Catherine's Orphanage, he said after introductions were complete. May I ask why? Elena had prepared for this question. My foundation provides support for children with disabilities, particularly those without family support. St. Catherine's has a history of caring for such children, but we've received concerning reports about their current practices. Marcus's expression darkened. St. Catherine's has been on my radar for years. Never could get enough evidence to open a proper investigation before I was encouraged to retire. What kind of concerns did you have? Elena prompted. Children disappearing from the system, missing paperwork, staff who asked questions being terminated or reassigned. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. And the connection to Judge Hawthorne. Anything involving St. Catherine's lands in his court, always. And that's unusual? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Case assignments are supposed to be random. The statistical probability of every St. Catherine's case landing with Hawthorne is essentially zero. Graves' eyes showed a flash of the detective he had once been. Someone's manipulating the system. Isabella opened a folder. We have evidence suggesting financial irregularities as well. Large cash deposits with no clear source. Marcus studied the documents, his expression growing grimmer. This is serious. Much more than I was able to gather before they shut me down. He looked up at Elena. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? Justice, Elena answered simply. For the children who have been exploited, and for those who might be in the future if this continues. Marcus sat back, studying her. Noble goal, but you're going up against powerful people. Judge Hawthorne has connections throughout the judiciary, and if Damian Fletcher is involved as these financials suggest, you're dealing with one of the wealthiest men in the city. I'm aware of the challenges, Elena replied steadily. Are you? Marcus pressed. Because powerful men like that don't play by the rules. They'll crush anyone who threatens them. I have resources of my own, Elena said carefully. A look of understanding dawned on Marcus's face. This isn't just a foundation inquiry, is it? This is personal for you. Elena exchanged a glance with Isabella, who gave a slight nod. It was time for some truth. I grew up at St. Catherine's, Elena admitted. I was there for 10 years after my parents died. I witnessed firsthand how vulnerable children can be exploited in such institutions. Marcus's expression softened with genuine empathy. I'm sorry. That must have been difficult, especially with your condition. My disability made me a target in some ways, but it also meant I was considered unmarketable for the kind of placements that some children received. Elena's voice remained steady despite the painful memories. Others weren't so fortunate, including someone very dear to me. Marcus seemed to be weighing his options. Look, I want to help. This kind of operation has been eating at me for years, but we'd need serious protection to go up against Hawthorne and Fletcher. Evidence gathered legally that would stand up in court. And even then, what if I told you we had backing that could ensure our safety? Isabella interjected. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What kind of backing? The conference room door opened, and Victor Rossi stepped in, his presence immediately filling the space. Marcus Graves stiffened, recognition and alarm flashing across his face as he half rose from his seat. The kind that ensures no harm comes to my wife, Victor said calmly, moving to stand behind Elena's wheelchair. Marcus looked between Elena and Victor, understanding dawning. Elena Rossi, he said, the pieces falling into place. The foundation is a cover. The foundation is real, Elena corrected. But yes, this investigation has personal significance beyond my charitable interests. Marcus sat back down slowly, his eyes never leaving Victor. When I was on the force, we had a saying about your organization, Mr. Rossi. Look too close, and you disappear. Victor's expression remained impassive. And yet here you are, looking very closely at something that matters a great deal to me. To us, Elena amended, placing her hand over Victor's where it rested on her shoulder. St. Catherine's Orphanage destroyed lives then, and it's destroying lives now. We want to end that, legally, with evidence that ensures Hawthorne and Fletcher face justice in court. Marcus looked skeptical. No offense, Mr. Rossi, but you're not exactly known for your adherence to legal methods. People change, Victor replied simply. Do they? Marcus challenged. When given sufficient reason, Victor's eyes moved meaningfully to Elena. Marcus seemed to consider this, the detective in him assessing, weighing options. Let's say I believe you. Let's say I help gather evidence. What happens if, when, Hawthorne and Fletcher realize they're being investigated? They have resources too. My wife's safety is my primary concern, Victor said, his voice taking on an edge that reminded everyone just who they were dealing with. I've agreed to pursue this legally, for her sake. But make no mistake, Mr. Bio. Graves, if these men threaten Elena, all agreements are void. Elena felt a tension in the room that hadn't been there before. What my husband means, she intervened smoothly, is that we're committed to legal justice, but we won't allow anyone to endanger this investigation or those conducting it. Marcus studied them both for a long moment. Why me? You could hire any private investigator in the city. Because you've already looked into St. Catherine's, Isabella explained. You have knowledge of the system, connections in the police department, and most importantly, a reputation for integrity. And because you have nothing to lose, Victor added bluntly, your career was sacrificed for asking the wrong questions. This is a chance to find the right answers. Elena could see Marcus weighing his options, the internal struggle visible on his weathered face. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'm in, but we do this by the book. Evidence that will stand up in court. No shortcuts, no intimidation, no Victor Rossi special methods. Agreed, Elena said before Victor could respond. We'll provide you with everything we have so far, and the resources to conduct a thorough investigation. As they finalized arrangements, Elena couldn't help but notice Victor's tension. He maintained a professional demeanor, but she knew him well enough to sense his discomfort with bringing in an outsider, especially a former police detective, so close to their operation. Later, as they drove back to the estate, Elena addressed his concerns directly. He's a good man, Victor, and we need someone with his experience. Victor gazed out the window, his profile sharp against the passing cityscape. Good men can become liabilities when they adhere too rigidly to their principles. Isn't that exactly what we need in this case? Someone who won't compromise? Victor turned to her, his expression serious. Just be cautious, Elena. This investigation puts us at risk in ways you may not fully appreciate. Hawthorne and Fletcher have connections throughout the city, including with families that compete with ours. You mean rival criminal organizations? Elena clarified. Yes. If they discover we're investigating them, they could ally with our enemies. The Castillo family in particular would seize any opportunity to strike at us. Elena hadn't considered this angle. All the more reason to keep this investigation quiet and legal. If we move against them the way you originally wanted to, it would start a war, Victor finished for her. Yes, your way is smarter if we can make it work. He took her hand. Just promise me you'll be careful. Let Graves take the risks. You coordinate from the estate where you're protected. Elena squeezed his hand. I'll be careful, but Victor, I can't hide away while others do the work. This matters too much to me. Victor didn't argue, but the concern in his eyes told Elena the conversation wasn't over. As they passed through the estate gates, Elena noticed additional security personnel patrolling the grounds. Victor was already increasing their protection. Inside the house, Sophia intercepted them with an urgent message. Mr. Volkov is waiting in your office, sir. He says it's important. Victor exchanged a look with Elena. I'll handle this. No, Elena said firmly. We'll handle it. Together. Nikolai Volkov stood at the window of Victor's office, his scarred hands clasped behind his back. He turned as they entered, his nod to Victor respectful, his acknowledgement of Elena notably cooler. You wanted to see me, Nikolai? Victor asked, moving behind his desk. Yes, boss. There's a situation with the Castillo territory. They're pushing into the docks, testing our responses. Nikolai's eyes flickered to Elena. It's a delicate matter requiring traditional methods. Elena understood the implication. Violence, intimidation, the old ways. I see, Victor replied. And you believe this warrants immediate attention? I do. Weakness now will be interpreted as an invitation for further incursions. Victor considered this. Prepare a team. I'll review your strategy this evening. Nikolai hesitated, clearly having more to say but unwilling to speak freely in front of Elena. If there's something else, Nikolai, you can say it, Victor prompted. The lieutenant straightened. With respect, boss, there are concerns among the captains about our recent direction. The focus on legitimate businesses, the reduced pressure on our street operations. Some wonder if we're abandoning what made us strong. By some, you mean yourself, Elena observed quietly. Nikolai's eyes narrowed slightly. I speak for many who have served this family loyally for years, and whose loyalty is now in question. Victor's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Never my loyalty, boss, Nikolai replied quickly. But change must be managed carefully. The men need to understand the vision. Right now, they see only retreat from the territories we fought for. Elena wheeled forward slightly. It's not retreat, Nikolai. It's evolution. The old methods attract too much attention in today's world. Technology, surveillance, financial tracking. The risks grow while the profits diminish. Nikolai regarded her with barely concealed frustration. With respect, Mrs. Rossi, this organization operated successfully for decades before your arrival. The men understand strength and respect. They don't understand corporate acquisitions and charity foundations. Then perhaps it's time they learned, Elena replied evenly. The tension in the room was palpable. Victor rose from his desk, his movement breaking the standoff. Nikolai, prepare your strategy for the Castillo situation. We'll discuss it privately this evening. His tone made clear that the conversation was over. Nikolai nodded, his professional mask returning. Of course, boss. With a final glance at Elena, he left the office. When they were alone, Victor sighed heavily. That went well. Elena couldn't help but laugh at his dry tone. He really doesn't like me. He doesn't understand you, Victor corrected, returning to his desk. Or the future I'm trying to build. For Nikolai, power comes from fear. The idea that we could be equally powerful through legitimate means is foreign to him. Elena moved closer, her expression thoughtful. We need to bring him around, Victor. Nikolai has influence with your captains. If he openly opposes our changes, he won't, Victor said with absolute certainty. His loyalty to me is absolute. Elena wasn't so sure, but she knew better than to push the point now. What about the Castillo situation? Is it serious? Victor's expression darkened slightly. Rafael Castillo is young, ambitious. His uncle's death left a power vacuum, and he's eager to prove himself. Testing our boundaries is to be expected. And your response? Will be measured but firm, Victor assured her. No unnecessary violence. Elena studied her husband's face, seeing the conflict there. The man he had been battling with the man he was trying to become. For all his assurances, Victor Rossi had been shaped by a world where violence was the primary language of power. Changing that wasn't as simple as making a decision. I trust you, she said finally. Do what needs to be done to protect our people. Just remember what we're working toward. Victor's expression softened. A future worth having. I remember. As Elena left Victor to his work, she couldn't shake the feeling that their carefully balanced world was beginning to tilt. Nikolai's resistance, the Castillo threats, the investigation into St. Catherine's, each alone would be manageable. Together, they created a precarious situation that would test not only their resolve but the very foundation of their relationship. 3 weeks into Marcus Graves' investigation, the first real breakthrough came. Elena was reviewing financial documents in the estate's library when Isabella arrived, her usual composed demeanor disrupted by obvious excitement. We found it, Isabella announced, placing a flash drive on the table. The connection between Hawthorne, Fletcher, and the missing children. Elena set aside her papers. Tell me. Marcus tracked 6 children who disappeared from St. Catherine's records last year, all of them supposedly adopted by families that don't exist. He managed to trace one of them, a 12-year-old boy named Michael, to a Fletcher construction site in Mexico. Child labor, Elena said grimly. Exactly, but here's the key. Marcus found a series of payments from Fletcher's company to a shell corporation that links directly back to Hawthorne. Essentially, Fletcher is paying Hawthorne for access to the children. Elena felt a mix of triumph and sorrow. This is what we needed, evidence that directly connects them both to trafficking. There's more, Isabella continued. Marcus discovered that at least 3 other judges in the city are receiving similar payments. This isn't just about St. Catherine's, it's a network that spans multiple orphanages and youth facilities. The scale of the corruption was staggering. We need to bring this to Victor immediately. They found Victor in his office with Nikolai, reviewing security footage from what appeared to be one of their waterfront properties. Both men looked up as Elena and Isabella entered, their conversation halting abruptly. We have something, Elena announced, nodding to Isabella to explain their findings. As Isabella laid out the evidence Marcus had uncovered, Elena watched the men's reactions. Victor's expression grew increasingly dark, a cold rage building behind his eyes. Nikolai remained impassive, but his scarred hands clenched into fists on the desk. When Isabella finished, Victor was silent for a long moment. "How reliable is this evidence?" he finally asked. "Rock solid," Isabella assured him. "Bank records, corporate filings, witness statements from a former St. Catherine's administrator who's now willing to talk. Marcus has built a case that would stand up in any court, except possibly Hawthorne's." "And where is Marcus now?" Victor inquired. "Securing the witness, a woman named Claire Bennett. She worked at St. Catherine's for 15 years before being dismissed 6 months ago. She has documentation of specific children who were channeled into the trafficking network." Nikolai spoke for the first time. "These men know we're investigating them by now. The witness won't be safe. Marcus has her in a secure location," Isabella replied. "Only he knows where." Victor stood, decision clear in his bearing. "We move on this now. Isabella, prepare everything for the district attorney. Elena and I will ensure the witness remains protected until she can testify." Nikolai cleared his throat. "Boss, with respect, this is exactly what I warned about. Hawthorne and Fletcher will retaliate when this goes public. They have connections to the Castillo family, who are already pushing at our borders. The timing is dangerous." "The timing is never perfect for justice, Nikolai," Elena interjected. "Children are being trafficked. How long should we wait?" Nikolai's eyes flashed with frustration. "This isn't about the children, Mrs. Rossi. This is about the safety of our organization, our people. Exposing Hawthorne and Fletcher publicly puts a target on all of us." Victor raised a hand, silencing further debate. "Nikolai, increase security at all our properties. Move our more vulnerable operations to backup locations. We'll proceed with the evidence as planned." The lieutenant's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Yes, boss." As Nikolai left the room, Elena couldn't miss the tension in his departure. "He's really opposed to this," she observed quietly. "He sees only the risks, not the necessity," Victor replied, turning to Isabella. "Have the evidence ready by tomorrow. We'll arrange a meeting with District Attorney Reynolds directly. He's not in Hawthorne's pocket." After Isabella departed to make arrangements, Elena found herself alone with Victor. The energy in the room had shifted, a gravity settling over them both as they recognized the magnitude of what they were undertaking. "This will change everything," Elena said softly. "Once we move against men like Hawthorne and Fletcher publicly, there's no going back." Victor moved to the window, gazing out at the estate grounds. "I've never sought public battles. Our world operates in shadows for a reason. But this," he turned to face her, "this is different. What they're doing to those children." Elena wheeled closer to him. "It reminds you of what happened to you, what almost happened to me." "Yes." The single word carried the weight of all his childhood trauma, all his adult violence. "We're doing the right thing, Victor." He knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "The right thing may still come at a cost. I need you to be prepared for that." Before Elena could respond, a commotion outside the office door drew their attention. Sophia burst in, her usually composed demeanor shattered. "Sir, it's Nikolai. He's called an emergency meeting of the captains at the warehouse. Antonio and Dimitri are with him." Victor straightened, alarm evident in his posture. "Without my authorization?" "Yes, sir." Marco overheard them discussing concerns about the organization's direction, about Mrs. Rossi's influence. Victor's expression hardened into something Elena rarely saw, directed at his own people. "Have the car brought around. Now." As Sophia hurried to comply, Elena grabbed Victor's arm. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. If Nikolai is challenging my authority, then you need me there," Elena insisted. "This isn't just about you, Victor. It's about us, our vision for the future. I won't hide away while you fight this battle alone." Victor searched her face, conflict evident in his eyes. "Elena, if this turns violent—" "It won't," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Nikolai respects you too much for that. This is about being heard, and I need to speak for myself." After a moment's hesitation, Victor nodded. "Stay close to me, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments." The warehouse on the waterfront had been one of the Rossi family's first properties, acquired during Victor's early years with Kuzman. It served now as a meeting place and distribution center for some of their less legitimate operations. As their car approached, Elena could see unusual activity, men positioned as lookouts, vehicles she didn't recognize. "Something's not right," Victor murmured, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Their driver, one of Victor's most trusted men, exchanged a look with him through the rearview mirror. "Want me to call for backup, boss?" Victor shook his head. "No, this is internal. We handle it ourselves." As they entered the warehouse, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Gathered in the main floor space were all 8 of Victor's captains, men who controlled different territories and operations throughout the city. Nikolai stood at their center, with Antonio Reyes and Dmitry Zolotov, Victor's oldest captains, flanking him like lieutenants. The conversation ceased as Victor entered. Elena at his side. For a moment, no one moved. Then Victor broke the silence. "Explain yourself, Nikolai." His voice was quiet but carried the dangerous edge that had made men fear him for years. Nikolai stepped forward, his scarred face solemn. "Boss, we needed to talk, all of us, about the direction things are heading. And you couldn't bring these concerns to me directly?" Victor's tone was measured, but Elena could feel the coiled tension in him. "We tried," Antonio Reyes interjected, a stocky man with cold eyes. "For months we've watched as operations are scaled back, territories abandoned, all while we chase legitimacy like common businessmen. The men are confused," Dmitry Zolotov added, his Russian accent thick despite decades in America. "They don't understand why we retreat when we should advance, why we hide evidence for courts when we could solve problems directly." Victor's gaze swept the room, taking in each face. "So this is a vote of no confidence?" "No, boss," Nikolai said quickly. "This is a request for clarity, for a return to the principles that built this organization." Elena felt all eyes turn to her as Nikolai continued. "We respect Mrs. Rossi, but her influence has taken us from our strength. The Castillo family senses weakness. Our street soldiers question orders, all while we pursue personal vendettas against Hawthorne and Fletcher." "Personal vendettas?" Elena couldn't remain silent any longer. "Is that what you think this is?" Nikolai met her gaze directly. "With respect, Mrs. Rossi, your history with St. Catherine's has become our priority. Meanwhile, our actual business suffers." Elena wheeled forward slightly, feeling Victor tense beside her. "St. Catherine's is trafficking children, Mr. Volkov. Children like Victor and I once were. You call that a personal vendetta?" "I call it a distraction," Nikolai replied bluntly. "One that compromises our security and diverts resources at a critical time." The room grew impossibly tense as Elena moved her wheelchair closer to Nikolai. "Let me be very clear. My influence, as you call it, isn't about weakening this organization. It's about ensuring it survives. The old ways, your ways, are becoming increasingly dangerous in a world of digital surveillance, financial tracking, and international law enforcement cooperation." She looked around the room, meeting each captain's eyes in turn. "Victor built this empire from nothing. He earned your loyalty through strength, yes, but also through vision. The vision now is evolution, adaptation, survival," Dmitry scoffed. "Pretty words from someone who knows nothing of our world." "I know more than you think," Elena countered. "I know that 3 of your gambling operations were raided last year because digital transactions were traced. I know that weapons shipments are increasingly monitored through satellite technology. I know that every one of you in this room carries a phone that tracks your movements and records your conversations." Her words landed with visible impact. These were men accustomed to thinking in terms of physical territory and manpower, not digital vulnerabilities. "The future doesn't belong to the strongest anymore," Elena continued. "It belongs to the smartest, the most adaptable. Right now, we're vulnerable not because we're pursuing legitimacy, but because we're caught between worlds." Antonio stepped forward, challenge in his posture. "And whose fault is that? Before you came, we knew who we were. Now we're neither criminals nor businessmen, and the confusion costs us respect on the streets." Victor, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke. "Is that what you all believe? That Elena has weakened us?" The captains exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was Nikolai who finally answered. "We believe you've lost focus, boss. The Victor Rossi we followed would never have hesitated to eliminate threats like Hawthorne and Fletcher. He wouldn't concern himself with court evidence or witness protection. He would act decisively, protecting our interests while sending a message that no one crosses our family. And if I told you that this is exactly what I'm doing?" Victor's voice was dangerously soft. "That eliminating these men publicly, legally, sends a much stronger message than a bullet ever could." Nikolai shook his head. "I wouldn't believe it. This isn't strategy. This is compromise. And the Victor Rossi I know doesn't compromise." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Elena felt the moment balancing on a knife's edge. If Victor responded with anger, with threats, he would only confirm Nikolai's accusation that he had changed, become weaker. Instead, Victor did something none of them expected. He laughed. The sound, genuine and without malice, echoed in the warehouse. The captains exchanged confused glances as Victor approached Nikolai, stopping an arm's length away. "You've been with me a long time, old friend," Victor said, his tone conversational. "You taught me much of what I know, but you never taught me how to adapt." He turned, addressing the room. "Nikolai sees compromise where I see strategy. He sees retreat where I see repositioning. He thinks following Elena's guidance makes me weak." Victor's expression hardened. "He's wrong." With lightning speed that belied his formal attire, Victor struck. A precise blow to Nikolai's throat left the older man gasping, dropping to one knee. Before any of the captains could react, Victor had drawn his weapon, the barrel pressed against Nikolai's temple. "I could kill you right now," Victor said softly, "for questioning me in front of my captains. for undermining my authority. The old Victor Rossi would have done exactly that. Elena watched, heart pounding, as Victor slowly lowered the gun. But the old Victor Rossi was short-sighted, he continued, ruled by impulse rather than strategy. The old Victor Rossi would be dead or in prison by now. He stepped back, holstering his weapon as Nikolai rubbed his throat, eyes wide with shock at the sudden attack and equally sudden mercy. My wife isn't weakening this family. She's saving it. Victor's voice carried to every corner of the warehouse. While you've been counting street corners and protection payments, she's been seeing the bigger picture, the changing landscape, the future. Victor moved to stand beside Elena's wheelchair. I built this organization to protect what matters to me. That hasn't changed. What has changed is how that protection must be provided in today's world. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on each captain. Anyone who can't adapt should leave now. No repercussions, no consequences. Take your personal belongings and go. But understand this. If you stay, you follow my lead, my vision, without question. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena held her breath, acutely aware that this moment would define their future. If even one captain walked out, others might follow. The organization could fracture, leading to exactly the kind of weakness Rafael Castillo was looking to exploit. It was Antonio who broke the silence. I've followed you for 15 years, boss. I won't stop now. One by one, the captains voiced their continued loyalty. Only Dmitri hesitated, his loyalty to Nikolai evident in his troubled expression. Dmitri? Victor prompted. The Russian sighed heavily. I stay, but know that I am not convinced yet of this new direction. Fair enough, Victor acknowledged. Conviction comes with results. All eyes turned to Nikolai, still kneeling where Victor had struck him. The choice before him was clear, submit or leave. Slowly, painfully, Nikolai rose to his feet. His eyes found Elena's, something complex passing across his scarred features. You've changed him, he said quietly. An acknowledgement rather than an accusation. He's changed himself, Elena corrected gently. Nikolai turned to Victor, straightening to his full height. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone, he knelt again, this time in formal respect rather than from a blow. I have served the Rossi family since before you took the name, he said, his voice rough. I will continue to serve, if you will have me, but know that my concerns remain. Victor reached down, pulling his oldest lieutenant to his feet. Your concerns are noted, your loyalty is valued, but never, his voice hardened, never question my authority in front of my captains again. Nikolai nodded, acceptance if not complete understanding in his eyes. As the meeting dispersed, the crisis temporarily averted. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The old guard had been brought in line, but resentments would linger. And now, with the evidence against Hawthorne and Fletcher ready to be presented, they were about to face external threats as well. The balance they had so carefully maintained was shifting, and Elena wasn't certain they could control where it would land. The evidence package against Judge Hawthorne and Damian Fletcher was delivered to District Attorney Reynolds the following morning. The thick dossier contained bank records, witness statements, photographs, and digital communications that painted a damning picture of corruption and child trafficking. Reynolds is a good man, Marcus assured Elena as they waited in Victor's office for confirmation that the package had been received. Ambitious, careful, but fundamentally honest. Once he sees what we've compiled, he'll have no choice but to act. Elena wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. These men have evaded justice for years. They have connections throughout the system. Not like this, Isabella interjected. Never before has anyone assembled such comprehensive evidence, and crucially, never before has anyone had the protection of the Rossi family while doing so. The irony wasn't lost on Elena, using the shield of a criminal organization to finally bring criminals to justice. But before she could respond, Victor entered the office, his expression grim. Reynolds received the package, he announced. His office just called Isabella's firm to confirm the source and verify the chain of custody for the evidence. That's good, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. He's taking it seriously. Too seriously, Victor countered. Reynolds is meticulous, methodical. He'll spend weeks verifying everything before he moves, weeks during which Hawthorne and Fletcher can prepare their defense, or worse. Elena understood his concern. You think they'll come after us? I think they'll try to discredit the evidence and eliminate the threat, Victor replied. Starting with Claire Bennett, the witness. The former St. Catherine's administrator had been relocated to a safe house Marcus arranged. Her testimony the linchpin of their case against Hawthorne and Fletcher. We need to move her, Marcus said immediately. If Reynolds is making calls, word could get back to Hawthorne. Victor nodded in agreement. My thoughts exactly. Where is she now? A cabin outside the city. Isolated. Only I know the location. Not isolated enough, Victor said firmly. Bring her to the estate. We have the security to protect her until Reynolds is ready to move. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the suggestion. Mr. Rossi, With all due respect, bringing her to your home could compromise her testimony. If the defense can prove she was under your influence, her credibility could be questioned. Better questioned than dead, Victor replied bluntly. Elena intervened before the disagreement could escalate. What if we moved her to one of Isabella's properties? The Moretti family has vacation homes that aren't publicly connected to them, right? Isabella nodded. My father's lake house is held in a shell corporation. It's remote, secured, and untraceable to either the Moretti or Rossi names. The solution satisfied everyone, and arrangements were quickly made. Marcus would bring Claire to the lake house that evening, with security provided discreetly by Victor's men. As Isabella and Marcus left to make preparations, Elena noticed Victor's tension hadn't eased. What is it? She asked once they were alone. There's something else bothering you. Victor paced the office, a rare display of restless energy. Reynolds isn't the only one who received information this morning. I got a call from Antonio. Rafael Castillo is making moves on our territory again, more aggressive this time. You think it's connected to Hawthorne and Fletcher? The timing is too convenient to be coincidence, Victor confirmed. Castillo would never risk direct confrontation unless he believed we were vulnerable or distracted. Elena processed this information. So Hawthorne and Fletcher are using Castillo to apply pressure while they deal with the evidence against them. Exactly. It's a two-front battle. If we focus on protecting our witness and the legal case, Castillo encroaches on our territory. If we turn our attention to Castillo, Hawthorne and Fletcher have time to undermine the investigation. The strategy was clever, Elena had to admit. Then we need to split our focus. You handle Castillo. I'll coordinate with Isabella and Marcus on the legal front. Victor's expression darkened. No, you stay here, protected. I'll manage both situations. That's exactly what they want, Elena argued. For you to be stretched too thin, we need to divide and conquer, Victor. I can work with Marcus and Isabella from here at the estate. I'll be safe. Before Victor could respond, Sophia appeared at the door, her expression troubled. Sir, there's a situation. Nikolai has been attacked leaving his apartment. He's being brought here now. Victor's expression shifted instantly from concern to cold rage. How bad? Serious, sir. Gunshot wounds. Dr. Petrov is on his way. As Sophia left to make preparations, Victor turned to Elena. It started, he said grimly. Castillo sending a message by targeting my lieutenant. Next it will be our other captains, our businesses, and eventually, us, Elena finished for him. They're trying to destabilize everything at once. Victor reached for his phone, issuing rapid orders to increase security at all their properties and recall their key personnel to safe locations. Elena watched him transform before her eyes, the businessman giving way to the tactician, the husband to the leader. When Dr. Petrov arrived 20 minutes later, Nikolai was already being settled in one of the estate's guest rooms that had been converted to a makeshift medical facility. Elena waited in the hallway as Victor conferred with the doctor, their voices low and urgent. Will he survive? She asked when Victor finally emerged. Yes. 2 gunshot wounds, neither fatal. He was lucky. Victor's expression was grim. Or perhaps luck had nothing to do with it. This wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a message. For you, for us all. Castillo letting us know he can reach anyone, anywhere. Victor ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I need to meet with the captains immediately. This changes everything. What about Claire Bennett, the witness? Isabella and Marcus will have to manage her protection for now. I need to focus on securing our people before anyone else gets hurt. Elena nodded, understanding the impossible position Victor was in. Go. I'll check on Nikolai and coordinate with Isabella. As Victor departed to rally his forces, Elena wheeled herself into Nikolai's room. The lieutenant was pale but conscious, his torso heavily bandaged, an IV drip in his arm. His eyes opened as she approached. Mrs. Rossi, he acknowledged weakly. Come to see the old lion wounded? Despite everything, Elena smiled at his defiance. I came to see how you're doing, and to apologize. Nikolai raised an eyebrow, wincing at the movement. Apologize? For what? You warned us this would happen, that going after Hawthorne and Fletcher would make us vulnerable, put targets on all of us. Nikolai was silent for a moment, studying her with surprising intensity given his condition. You were right too, he finally said. About the children, about justice. The admission clearly cost him effort, and Elena was touched by the gesture. We're going to fix this, Nikolai. All of it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The boss said the same thing. You two. More alike than I realized. Before Elena could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught her attention. Sophia appeared at the door, her face ashen. Mrs. Rossi, you need to come quickly. It's Isabella. There's been an accident. Elena's heart sank as she followed Sophia to Victor's office, where he was already on the phone, his expression thunderous. He ended the call as she entered. Isabella's car was forced off the road on her way to meet Marcus, he reported grimly. She's in the hospital, condition critical. Marcus is bringing Claire Bennett here immediately. It's not safe anywhere else now. This is my fault, Elena whispered, the weight of guilt settling on her shoulders. We pushed too hard, too fast. Victor knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. No, this is Hawthorne and Fletcher. This is Castillo. The blame lies with them, not you. But I insisted we go after them publicly instead of your way. Now people are getting hurt. Our people. Listen to me, Victor said firmly. What we're doing is right, necessary. These men have been trafficking children for years, destroying lives with impunity. Someone had to stand against them. Elena wasn't comforted. At what cost, Victor? Nikolai shot. Isabella in critical condition. Who's next? Victor didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, Elena felt a terrible premonition. The stakes had risen beyond what either of them had anticipated. This wasn't just business or justice anymore. It was war. I need you to go to the safe room, Victor said suddenly, rising to his feet. Until Marcus arrives with Claire. Until we can secure the estate completely. Victor, please, Elena. The rare plea in his voice stopped her objection. I can't focus on protecting everyone if I'm worried about you. Just for a few hours. Recognizing the wisdom in his request, Elena nodded. All right, but keep me updated on everything. Isabella, Nikolai, the witness, all of it. As Sophia escorted her to the secure room built into the heart of the estate, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that events were spiraling beyond their control. The careful balance they had maintained between Victor's world and her influence was collapsing under external pressure. Hours passed in the windowless secure room, Elena alternating between anxiety and determination as she reviewed their options. When the door finally opened, she expected Victor or Sophia. Instead, it was Marcus Graves who entered, his weathered face haggard with exhaustion. Where's Claire? Elena asked immediately, noticing he was alone. Marcus collapsed into a chair, running a hand over his face. Gone. We were ambushed on the way here. Professional hit team. At least 6 men. I managed to escape, but they took Claire. The news hit Elena like a physical blow. No, that's not possible. How did they know where to find you? I've been asking myself the same question, Marcus replied grimly. Only a handful of people knew the route we were taking. Someone talked, or someone was watching, Elena theorized. Following you from the beginning. Marcus shook his head. I was careful, very careful. This was an inside job, Mrs. Rossi. Someone close to us betrayed the plan. The implication was chilling. Have you told Victor? He's the one who sent me to you. He's handling the situation. Something in Marcus's tone made Elena uneasy. What does that mean exactly? The former detective met her gaze directly. It means he's reverting to type, Mrs. Rossi. The Victor Rossi I heard about for years on the force. The one who solves problems permanently. Elena felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. After all their work, all their progress toward legitimacy, they were being forced back into the old ways by circumstance and betrayal. I need to see him, she said, already moving toward the door. He gave strict instructions for you to remain here, Marcus warned. I don't care. This affects both of us. Our future. I won't be sidelined while critical decisions are made. Marcus didn't try to stop her as she left the secure room, navigating the familiar halls of the estate with determined speed. She found Victor in his private study, not his official office. The distinction was telling. This was where Victor the man, not Victor the boss, made his hardest decisions. He looked up as she entered, unsurprised by her appearance. You should be in the secure room. You should be consulting with me before you make decisions that affect our future, she countered, wheeling closer to his desk. Marcus told me about Claire, that you suspect betrayal. Victor's expression was carefully neutral. Not suspect, no. The ambush was too precise, too well coordinated. They knew exactly when and where to strike. Who? Elena asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Victor was silent for a long moment. We're still determining that. The careful phrasing told Elena everything she needed to know. You're interrogating someone, one of our own people. Elena, no. This isn't what we agreed to. This isn't the future we're building. Victor stood, his patience visibly fraying. They shot Nikolai. They put Isabella in the hospital. They've taken our key witness. What would you have me do? Stand by while Hawthorne and Fletcher dismantle everything we've built? While they continue trafficking children with impunity? Of course not, Elena replied, keeping her voice steady. But there has to be another way, one that doesn't drag us back into the darkness. Sometimes the darkness is necessary, Victor said quietly. You've known what I am from the beginning, Elena, what I'm capable of. I also know what you're trying to become, she reminded him, what we're trying to build together. Victor turned away, gazing out the window at the estate grounds where security personnel now patrolled openly, weapons visible. Some things can't be changed through good intentions alone. Some enemies only understand one language. Elena moved closer to him, reaching for his hand. If you do this, if you revert to the old methods, Hawthorne and Fletcher win. They will have succeeded in dragging you back down to their level. If it protects you, I'll gladly descend to any level. Victor replied, his voice hardening. Before Elena could respond, there was a sharp knock at the study door. At Victor's acknowledgement, Dmitry Zolotov entered, his expression grim. "We found something, boss." On Antonio's phone. Communications with Castillo's people going back months. Elena felt Victor go completely still beside her. "Antonio?" The disbelief in his voice was profound. "He's been with me for 15 years. Dmitry nodded grimly. "The evidence is clear. He's been feeding information to Castillo. Locations, movements, security details, including the route Marcus was taking with the witness. The betrayal of a captain, especially one as long-serving as Antonio Reyes, was unprecedented." Elena could see the impact of this revelation on Victor. Not just anger, but deep personal hurt beneath his controlled exterior. "Where is he now?" Victor asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Secured in the basement, awaiting your judgment." The pregnant pause spoke volumes about what that judgment was expected to be. In the old days, betrayal of this magnitude would have only one punishment. "Leave us," Victor ordered. When Dmitry had gone, he turned to Elena, conflict evident in his eyes. "This changes things. Antonio wasn't just any soldier. He was family. He sat at our table, attended our wedding." "I know," Elena said softly. "But Victor, even betrayal this profound doesn't justify returning to the old ways. What would you have me do? Let him go? After what he's done? No, but there are options between execution and freedom. Turn him over to the authorities with evidence of his collusion with Castillo." Victor laughed bitterly. "The authorities? The same system controlled by men like Hawthorne? The same system that failed both of us as children?" Elena had no immediate answer. The corruption they were fighting had tentacles throughout the legal system. That was the very problem they were trying to address. But surrendering to violence now would undo everything they'd worked for. "There has to be another way," she insisted. "A way that doesn't require blood." Victor was silent for a long moment, internal conflict visible in the tension of his body. Finally, he sighed heavily. "For you," he said quietly. "Only for you would I even consider alternatives." Relief washed over Elena. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Victor cautioned. "We still need to find Claire Bennett before Hawthorne and Fletcher silence her permanently, and we need to neutralize the threat from Castillo. One problem at a time," Elena suggested. "First, let's deal with Antonio. Get what information we can from him about Castillo's operations, about where they might be holding Claire." Victor nodded slowly, decision forming. "No torture, no execution, but he talks, or he spends the rest of his life in a cell far from here. Those are the only options. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I'll help you question him." Victor looked surprised. "You want to be present for that?" "I need to be," Elena said firmly. "This affects both of us, our future. Besides, Antonio might respond differently to me than to you. He might see me as the weaker target, more susceptible to manipulation." A ghost of a smile touched Victor's lips. "Anyone who thinks you're the weaker one hasn't been paying attention." As they prepared to confront Antonio, Elena noticed Victor checking his phone repeatedly, a shadow of concern crossing his face. "What is it?" she asked. "Nikolai. His condition has worsened. The bullet fragments shifted, causing internal bleeding. Dr. Petrov is working on him now." The news added urgency to their situation. How many more would be hurt or killed while they tried to navigate this crisis? In the basement room where Antonio was being held, Elena was struck by the contrast between the elegant estate above and this stark, utilitarian space below. Antonio sat handcuffed to a metal chair, his face bruised but his expression defiant as Victor and Elena entered. "Come to pass sentence, boss?" he asked, his tone mocking. "Brought your wife to watch? I didn't take you for someone who needed an audience." "Careful, Antonio," Victor warned quietly. "Your situation is precarious enough without adding disrespect." Elena positioned her wheelchair across from Antonio, studying the man who had betrayed them. "Why?" she asked simply. "After 15 years of loyalty, why turn on Victor now?" Antonio's eyes narrowed as they focused on her. "You really want to know, Mrs. Rossi? It was you, your influence, turning us away from what made us strong, what earned us respect. So this was about resisting change." He laughed harshly. "This was about survival. Victor used to understand that power comes from strength, from fear. Then you came along with your talk of legitimacy, your moral crusades. Meanwhile, our territories shrink, our profits decline, and our enemies grow bolder. You did this for money?" Victor's voice was dangerously soft. "I did this for the family," Antonio insisted. "The real family, not this corporate fantasy you're chasing." Elena leaned forward slightly. "And the children being trafficked, were they a fantasy too?" Something flickered in Antonio's eyes. Discomfort, perhaps even shame. Collateral damage. "In our world, there are always sacrifices." "Where is Claire Bennett?" Victor demanded, changing tactics. "Where is Castillo holding her?" Antonio smirked. "Even if I knew, why would I tell you? My life is forfeit either way." "Not necessarily," Elena interjected, ignoring Victor's sharp glance. Help us find Claire, testify against Castillo, and there's another path. What path? Prison? Witness protection? Living like a rat in hiding? Antonio shook his head. I'd rather take my chances with a bullet. Victor stepped closer, his patience visibly thinning. You won't get that choice, Antonio. You'll give us what we need, or you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell so deep no one will hear you scream. The threat hung in the air, and Elena could see it land with impact. Antonio's defiance wavered slightly. Castillo has properties throughout the city, he finally said. But for something like this, a high-value captive, he'd use the old meatpacking facility on the river. Isolated, soundproof, easy to defend. Victor nodded, satisfied that Antonio was telling the truth. And Hawthorne and Fletcher, how are they connected to Castillo? Business partners. Castillo provides muscle and distribution networks for their trafficking operation. In return, they use their influence to keep him insulated from serious legal consequences. The pieces were falling into place. So when we threatened Hawthorne and Fletcher with exposure, they activated Castillo to eliminate the threat, Elena concluded. And I was their inside man, Antonio confirmed, a hint of pride creeping into his voice despite his situation. Feeding them information, weakening you from within while they attacked from without. Victor turned to leave, having heard enough. Keep him secured, he instructed the guards at the door. No one sees him without my direct authorization. As they returned upstairs, Elena could see Victor's mind working, strategizing. We move on the meatpacking facility tonight, he decided. Full team, coordinated approach. If Claire is there, we get her out. And if she's not, then we keep looking until we find her. Victor's determination was absolute. These men have taken enough from us. No more. Back in Victor's office, they found Sophia waiting with news. Sir, the hospital called. Miss Moretti is awake and asking to speak with Mrs. Rossi urgently. Hope flared in Elena's chest. Isabella's conscious? Is she going to be all right? The doctors are cautiously optimistic, Sophia replied. But she was insistent about speaking with you. Said it couldn't wait. Victor frowned. It's not safe for you to leave the estate right now. We could set up a secure video call, Elena suggested. Whatever Isabella needs to tell me might be crucial. The video call was arranged within minutes. Isabella Moretti appeared on the screen, her face bruised, her arm in a cast, but her eyes alert and determined. Elena, she said weakly, thank God. I need to tell you something important. We're listening, Elena assured her, with Victor standing close behind her wheelchair. Isabella took a painful breath. The accident wasn't random. They were waiting for me. They knew exactly which road I'd take. Antonio, Victor supplied grimly. We already found the leak. Isabella shook her head slightly, wincing at the movement. No, it's bigger than that. Before they ran me off the road, one of them approached my car. He said something, a message for Victor. She paused, gathering strength. He said, tell Rossi that Castillo sends his regards. Victor went very still. Rafael Castillo wouldn't be so bold, not for a simple intimidation. There's more, Isabella continued. After the crash, when I was barely conscious, I heard them talking. They mentioned St. Catherine's, and a name I recognized, Rafael Castillo Sr. Elena felt a chill run through her. Castillo's father? I thought he was dead. He is, Victor confirmed. Died years ago in prison. That's just it, Isabella said, her voice urgent despite her weakness. They were saying that the son was finishing what the father started, something about closing the circle and the Rossi debt. Victor's expression darkened with sudden comprehension. St. Catherine's, he murmured. Rafael Castillo Sr. was one of the men Father Mail worked with, one of the businessmen who took children from the orphanage. The implications were staggering. So this isn't just about territory or business, Elena realized. It's personal. Rafael Castillo is avenging his father by attacking us and protecting the same trafficking network his father used. Which means this goes much deeper than we thought, Victor concluded. The corruption at St. Catherine's, the trafficking network, it's been operating for decades, passing from father to son. Isabella nodded weakly. That's what I needed to tell you. This isn't just about stopping a current operation. It's about exposing a legacy of exploitation that spans generations. As the call ended, Elena could see the weight of this revelation settling on Victor's shoulders. This wasn't just business anymore. It was history repeating itself. The same evil that had separated them as children was now threatening them as adults. Victor, she said softly, this changes our approach. We're not just fighting Hawthorne and Fletcher, or even Castillo. We're fighting a system that's been in place for decades. He nodded grimly. A system that nearly claimed me. That would have claimed you if I hadn't gone in your place. The personal nature of this fight crystallized for them both in that moment. This wasn't just about justice or legitimacy anymore. It was about confronting the very darkness that had shaped their lives from childhood. We end this, Victor said, determination hardening his voice. Not just for the children being trafficked now, but for the children we were, for all those who had no one to protect them. As they prepared for the night's operation to recover Claire Bennett, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were approaching a decisive moment, not just in their fight against corruption, but in their journey together. The choices they made now would define not only their future but the legacy they would leave behind. The question was, could they defeat this entrenched evil without becoming the very darkness they sought to eliminate? The assault on the meatpacking facility was meticulously planned. Victor's remaining loyal captains coordinated teams to approach from multiple angles, with Dmitri leading the main force while Victor personally commanded a smaller, more mobile unit focused on locating and extracting Claire Bennett. Elena had fought fiercely to be included in the operation, but Victor had been immovable on this point. "This isn't about your capabilities," he'd explained as his men prepared their weapons and equipment. "This is about ensuring that no matter what happens tonight, you remain safe. If something goes wrong, if I don't return, someone needs to continue the fight." The unspoken possibility had hung heavily between them. For all his power, Victor Rossi was not invincible. Tonight he was facing enemies who had infiltrated his organization, who knew his methods, who had already proven willing to kill. "Just come back to me," Elena had said finally, conceding the argument. "Whatever happens, whatever decisions you have to make, just come back." Now, alone in Victor's office, Elena monitored the operation through a secure communications link. Sophia had brought her dinner, but it sat untouched as she listened to the terse updates from the field teams. Perimeter secured. East entrance breached. First floor clear, moving to second. The methodical progress of Victor's men was both reassuring and nerve-wracking. Then, a shift in the pattern of communications. "Contact, north stairwell. Taking fire, second floor. Multiple hostiles, heavily armed." Elena's heart raced as the sounds of gunfire came through the link, followed by shouted commands and the chaos of combat. Then Victor's voice, calm amid the storm. "Dmitri, hold position. Marco, take 2 men and flank from the west. Target located, third floor, east corner." Claire Bennett had been found, but from the continued sounds of fighting, Castillo's men were putting up fierce resistance. "Boss, we're pinned down on the second floor," Dmitri reported, strain evident in his voice. "Can't advance further without reinforcements." "Hold position," Victor ordered. "We're approaching the target now." More gunfire, more shouted commands. Then, suddenly, Victor's voice again, but different, urgent. "It's a trap. Fall back. Fall." The communication cut off abruptly. "Victor?" Elena called into the link. "Victor, respond." Nothing but static answered her. Frantically, she tried to reach any of the other team members. "Dmitri? Marco? Anyone? Respond." After several agonizing moments, Dmitri's voice came through, breathless and pained. "Ambush. They were waiting. The boss went after the witness. Got separated." "What about Victor? Where is he?" Elena demanded. "Don't know. Lost contact. Taking heavy fire." The communication deteriorated into chaos again, with only fragments coming through clearly. Elena sat frozen, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. Had Castillo captured Victor? Was he injured? Worse? When the office door opened, she turned expectantly, hoping for news. Instead, she found herself facing Nikolai Volkov. The lieutenant should have been bedridden, recovering from his wounds. Instead, he stood pale but determined, dressed and armed, despite the bandages visible beneath his shirt. "What are you doing up?" Elena asked in shock. "You're supposed to be resting." "No time for rest," Nikolai replied grimly. "The boss is in trouble." "You know what's happening?" The communication link failed. Nikolai nodded, moving carefully into the room. Castillo was waiting for them. Someone warned him. "Antonio is secured," Elena pointed out. "He couldn't have warned anyone. Not Antonio. Someone else." Nikolai's scarred face was grave. "We have another traitor in our ranks." The realization sent a chill through Elena. "Who?" Before Nikolai could answer, the office door burst open again. Dmitri Zolotov stood there, bloodied and disheveled, a gun in his hand. "Mrs. Rossi," he said, his accent thicker than usual with stress. "We need to move you to the secure room immediately. The estate might be compromised." Nikolai shifted slightly, positioning himself between Elena and Dmitri. "What happened at the meatpacking facility, Dmitri? Where is Victor?" Something flickered in Dmitri's eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or caution. Castillo's men were waiting. An ambush. The boss was separated from the main group when they collapsed part of the building. "We had to retreat." "And you left him there?" Nikolai's voice carried dangerous disbelief. "We had no choice. The structure was failing, and Castillo's men outnumbered us." Dmitri gestured toward the door. "Now please, Mrs. Rossi, we need to secure you while we organize a rescue operation." Elena studied Dmitri carefully, noting details that suddenly seemed significant. The lack of genuine concern in his eyes, the way his injury seemed less severe than his disheveled appearance suggested, the specific direction of his focus on her rather than Nikolai. "Where's Marco?" she asked, stalling for time as she processed her suspicions. Dead, Dimitri replied flatly, along with 5 others. Now, Mrs. Rossi, I'm not going anywhere with you, Elena interrupted, certainty replacing suspicion. You're the traitor, aren't you, Dimitri? Not Antonio. Or perhaps both of you. Dimitri's expression hardened, the pretense falling away. Clever woman, too clever for your own good. He raised his gun, pointing it directly at Elena. This could have been much simpler. Nikolai, despite his injuries, moved with surprising speed. He lunged at Dimitri, slamming into the younger man and disrupting his aim. The gun fired, the bullet embedding in the wall as the 2 men crashed to the floor in a violent struggle. Elena, go! Nikolai shouted, grappling with Dimitri for control of the weapon. Get to the secure room. Instead, Elena wheeled to Victor's desk, wrenching open the drawer where she knew he kept a pistol. Her hand closed around the weapon just as Dimitri gained the upper hand, slamming Nikolai's head against the floor with brutal force. Stop, Elena commanded, the gun steady in her hands despite her racing heart. Drop the weapon, Dimitri. Dimitri looked up, blood streaming from a cut on his face, his eyes wild with hatred. You think you can shoot me, cripple? You think you have what it takes? I think you're bleeding out from a stab wound you're trying to hide, Elena observed coolly, noting the growing dark stain on his side. I think Nikolai did more damage than you're admitting. And yes, I think I can pull this trigger before you can reach me. Uncertainty flickered across Dimitri's face as he realized she had seen through his facade. He was indeed injured, far more seriously than he'd let on. Castillo will kill you all, he spat. Victor is already dead. The witness too. You're lying, Elena replied steadily. If Victor were dead, you wouldn't be here trying to capture me. I'd be valuable to Castillo only as leverage against Victor. Dimitri's expression confirmed her deduction. Smart bitch, but it doesn't matter. Victor is in Castillo's hands. By morning, he'll wish he were dead. Using her moment of shock, Dimitri lunged forward, reaching for her gun. Elena didn't hesitate. She fired, the sound deafening in the confined space of the office. Dimitri staggered, clutching his shoulder, then collapsed to his knees. Where is he? Elena demanded, keeping the gun trained on him. Where has Castillo taken Victor? Dimitri laughed, a wet, pained sound. You'll never find him in time. Castillo has waited years for this moment, years to avenge his father. Nikolai had regained consciousness and struggled to his feet, retrieving Dimitri's fallen weapon. Tell us, traitor, or I'll make your last moments very unpleasant. Dimitri's eyes flicked between them, calculating his odds. Finally, he slumped in defeat. St. Catherine's. Castillo took him to St. Catherine's orphanage. Fitting? No? Where it all began. The revelation struck Elena like a physical blow. St. Catherine's, the source of their childhood trauma, the focus of their investigation, and now the setting for their final confrontation with Castillo. Why? She demanded. Why betray Victor after all these years? Money, Dimitri answered simply. Power. Castillo promised me territory, autonomy, more than I would ever have under Victor's new legitimate regime. His eyes found Elena's hatred burning through the pain. You destroyed what made this organization great, turned a lion into a house cat. Some of us weren't willing to follow that path. Nikolai struck him then, a precise blow that rendered Dimitri unconscious. We need to move, he said grimly, turning to Elena. Castillo will have men coming here next. We need to get to St. Catherine's, Elena insisted. Victor needs us. It's a trap, Nikolai pointed out. Castillo expects us to come charging in. That's why Dimitri told us the location. I don't care, Elena replied, her resolve hardening. Trap or not, I won't leave Victor in Castillo's hands. Are you with me, Nikolai? The scarred lieutenant studied her for a long moment, seeing something in her determination that seemed to satisfy him. Always, Mrs. Rossi. But we do this smart, not suicidal. While Nikolai secured Dimitri and gathered what remained of their loyal forces, Elena made 2 crucial calls. The first was to Marcus Graves, who had been coordinating with District Attorney Reynolds while recovering from injuries sustained during Claire Bennett's abduction. St. Catherine's Orphanage, she told him without preamble. That's where Castillo has taken Victor and possibly Claire. I need you to contact Reynolds. Get police support there as quickly as possible. Police won't move against Castillo without significant evidence, Marcus cautioned. And if they believe Victor Rossi is involved, then give them the evidence, Elena interrupted. All of it. The trafficking operation, Hawthorne and Fletcher's involvement, everything. Tell Reynolds this is his chance to bring down the entire network at once. Her second call was to Isabella Moretti, still hospitalized but conscious and determined to help. I need legal leverage, Elena explained after bringing Isabella up to speed. Something to ensure that when this is over, Victor doesn't end up in prison alongside Castillo. Isabella was quiet for a moment, thinking, immunity in exchange for testimony, she suggested. If Victor's evidence is crucial to bringing down Hawthorne and Fletcher, Reynolds might be willing to cut a deal. Make it happen, Elena instructed, whatever it takes. With these contingencies in place, Elena joined Nikolai and the small force of loyal men he had assembled. Despite his injuries, Nikolai had taken command with the authority of a lifetime in Victor's service, organizing their approach with tactical precision. The orphanage has been closed for renovations, he explained, showing Elena blueprints of the building. Officially, it's empty. In reality, Castillo has been using it as a staging area for his trafficking operation. Convenient cover. Who questions construction vehicles coming and going from a building under renovation? How many men will Castillo have there? Elena asked. Unknown, potentially dozens. We're going in with 13. Nikolai's expression was grim. Not good odds. We have the element of surprise, Elena pointed out. Castillo expects us to come in force, directly. He won't anticipate a small, targeted operation. Nikolai nodded approvingly. Precisely. We insert quietly, locate the boss and the witness, extract them, and withdraw. No extended engagement. As they prepared to depart, Elena faced a moment of truth. I'm coming with you, she announced, her tone making clear this wasn't a request. Nikolai's scarred face registered shock. Absolutely not. The boss would have my head. The boss isn't here to object, Elena countered. And I'm the one person Castillo won't expect. The one person who might be able to distract him at a crucial moment. It's too dangerous, Nikolai insisted. Your wheelchair will be an asset, not a liability. Castillo will underestimate me, just as everyone always does. Elena's eyes flashed with determination. I'm coming, Nikolai, either with your cooperation or without it. The lieutenant studied her, respect gradually replacing concern in his expression. You truly are his match, he said finally. Very well, but you stay with me at all times. St. Catherine's Orphanage loomed dark and forbidding against the night sky as they approached. The once familiar building of Elena's childhood now seemed alien, transformed by time and the knowledge of what had happened there. Scaffolding covered portions of the exterior, providing convenient cover for their approach. Nikolai's men moved with practiced efficiency, neutralizing perimeter guards silently and establishing an entry point through a service door. Elena followed in her wheelchair, Nikolai close beside her, both armed and acutely aware of the dangers ahead. Inside, the orphanage was a maze of partially demolished corridors and construction materials. The familiar layout of Elena's childhood had been distorted by renovation, making navigation challenging. They moved slowly, carefully, communicating through hand signals and whispered instructions. As they penetrated deeper into the building, evidence of Castillo's operation became clear. One large room had been converted into a processing center, with desks, computers, and file cabinets, all abandoned hastily, papers strewn about as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Documentation, Elena whispered, quickly scanning the visible papers. Records of children processed through the system. This is the evidence we need. Nikolai nodded, instructing one of his men to secure as much of the documentation as possible. Then they pressed on, following faint sounds that echoed through the building's core. They found Victor, in what had once been the orphanage chapel, a cruel choice that spoke to Castillo's theatrical sense of vengeance. The sacred space had been desecrated, the pews removed, the altar replaced with a makeshift throne from which Rafael Castillo observed the proceedings. Victor was on his knees in the center of the room, bloodied but defiant. His hands were bound behind him, and two of Castillo's men stood guard, weapons trained on him. To one side, Claire Bennett lay curled on the floor, apparently unconscious. Rafael Castillo himself was younger than Elena had expected, perhaps 30, with his father's features refined into aristocratic handsomeness. He was expensively dressed, projecting an air of cultured sophistication that contrasted sharply with the brutality of the scene he presided over. "Legacy you destroyed," Castillo was saying as they crept close enough to hear. "My father built something magnificent, something that would have endured for generations. And you, the orphan boy he might have sponsored, betrayed him." Victor's laugh was harsh, despite his obvious pain. "Your father was a monster who trafficked children. He deserved worse than he got." Castillo backhanded Victor across the face, the casual violence belying his composed exterior. "My father was a visionary. He saw the potential in unloved, unwanted children, gave them purpose, direction. He sold them like cattle," Victor spat, blood trickling from his split lip. "He created opportunity from waste," Castillo countered, "just as I've done. The network he built, I expanded. The connections he established with men like Hawthorne and Fletcher, I strengthened. While you've been playing house with your crippled bride, I've been building an empire worthy of my father's name." From their hidden position, Elena felt Nikolai tense beside her at the insult. She placed a restraining hand on his arm, shaking her head slightly. "Not yet. And now," Castillo continued, circling Victor like a predator, "I'll complete what he began. Victor Rossi, who might have been my father's greatest success, instead became his greatest failure. That failure ends tonight. He drew a gun, pressing it to Victor's temple. Any last words before I send you to join my father in hell? Elena couldn't wait any longer. Rolling her wheelchair forward into the open, she called out, "He's not going anywhere, Castillo." The sudden interruption froze everyone in the chapel. Castillo recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to delight as he recognized Elena. "Mrs. Rossi, how kind of you to join us. I had planned to collect you after finishing with your husband, but this is much more convenient." He gestured to his men, who moved to surround her, ignoring Nikolai and the others still hidden in the shadows. "Elena, no." Victor's voice was raw with desperation. "Get out of here." "I'm not leaving you," she replied, eyes fixed on Castillo. "Not now, not ever." Castillo laughed, genuinely amused. "How touching. The crippled bride comes to save her fallen king. Tell me, Miss Rossi, how exactly do you plan to stop me? Roll over my foot with your wheelchair?" "Not exactly," Elena replied calmly. "I plan to distract you while my men take position. I plan to keep you talking until the police arrive with the district attorney. And I plan to ensure that when this is over, you, Judge Hawthorne, and Damian Fletcher spend the rest of your lives in prison for child trafficking." Uncertainty flickered across Castillo's handsome features. "Police? Don't be absurd. No authority in this city would move against me without evidence," Elena finished for him. "Like the documentation we just secured from your processing center? Or perhaps the testimony of Claire Bennett, who knows every detail of your operation? Or maybe the financial records Isabella Moretti compiled, showing the money trail from Fletcher to Hawthorne to you." Castillo's composure fractured further. "You're bluffing. Even with evidence, the system protects people like me. Hawthorne would ensure." "Hawthorne has bigger problems," Elena interrupted. "As we speak, he's being arrested on multiple charges. Your protection is gone, Castillo. Your network is exposed. It's over." The bluff was calculated, based on hope rather than certainty, but Elena delivered it with absolute conviction. She could see the doubt spreading in Castillo's eyes, the beginnings of panic as he reassessed his position. "Even if what you say is true," he rallied, pressing the gun harder against Victor's head, "I can still end this my way. Take my revenge for my father. And then what?" Elena challenged. "You kill Victor, you kill me, you kill the witness. Then what? The evidence still exists. The authorities are still coming. All you do is add multiple murder charges to your inevitable sentence." Victor, watching this exchange with growing understanding, saw what Elena was doing, buying time, sowing doubt, creating opportunities. His eyes met hers briefly, a silent communication passing between them. "There is another option," Elena continued, wheeling slightly closer despite the guns trained on her. "Testify against Hawthorne and Fletcher. Provide evidence of the broader network. In exchange, the district attorney might consider a reduced sentence." Castillo's laugh was bitter. "You expect me to betray my associates? To become an informant? I'd rather die." "Would you? Really?" Elena's voice softened, becoming almost sympathetic. "Your father died in prison, Raphael. Alone. Forgotten. Is that truly the legacy you want to continue? Ending your family line in the same way?" The personal appeal struck deeper than the threats had. Castillo's expression shifted, vulnerability breaking through his composed facade. "My father was betrayed, abandoned by his so-called friends when it became convenient. As they'll abandon you," Elena pressed. "Hawthorne and Fletcher will sacrifice you to save themselves. They already have. Why else would they not be here tonight for this moment of triumph? They've distanced themselves, prepared their defenses, left you exposed." The realization visibly dawned on Castillo, his certainty crumbling. In that moment of distraction, Victor made his move. Despite his bound hands, he surged upward, slamming his head into Castillo's stomach and knocking him back. Chaos erupted as Nikolai and his men emerged from hiding, engaging Castillo's guards in fierce combat. Elena wheeled toward Claire Bennett's prone form, determined to protect the witness while the fighting raged around them. Gunfire cracked through the chapel, bullets splintering wood and ricocheting off stone. Elena reached Claire, positioning her wheelchair as a shield while checking the woman's pulse, weak but steady. Across the room, Victor had managed to get to his feet despite his bonds. He fought with desperate ferocity, using his body as a weapon since his hands remained tied. Nikolai moved to assist him, taking down one of Castillo's men with a precise shot before turning his attention to freeing Victor. Castillo himself had recovered from Victor's attack and now scrambled for his dropped weapon. Elena saw his intention and acted without hesitation. Pulling the gun from her waistband, she aimed and fired. The bullet struck Castillo's hand, sending him reeling back with a scream of pain and rage. "It's over, Raphael," Elena called above the din of conflict. "Surrender now, before anyone else gets hurt." Castillo cradled his injured hand, his face contorted with hatred. "Nothing is over," he snarled. "My father's legacy doesn't end here." From somewhere outside the chapel came the sudden wail of police sirens. Marcus had succeeded in bringing the authorities. The sound transformed the dynamic of the fight instantly. Castillo's remaining men, hearing the approaching law enforcement, began to falter. "Boss, we need to go," one of them urged Castillo. "Police are coming. We can still get out through the tunnel." Castillo hesitated, torn between revenge and survival. The decision was made for him as the first police officers breached the building, their arrival announced by shouts and the thunder of boots on the old wooden floors. "This isn't finished," Castillo promised, backing toward a side exit. "Not between us." As he turned to flee, Nikolai raised his weapon to fire. Victor, now freed from his bonds, placed a restraining hand on his lieutenant's arm. "Let him go," he ordered. "The police will handle him now." "Boss, he tried to kill you," Nikolai protested. "He deserves, not our judgment to pass," Victor interrupted firmly. "Not anymore." The decision marked a turning point, perhaps the most significant of Victor's transformation. The old Victor Rossi would have executed Castillo without hesitation, would have ensured the threat was permanently eliminated. This Victor, the one who had found his way back to Elena, chose a different path. As Castillo disappeared through the exit, the first police officers entered the chapel, weapons drawn. Behind them came Marcus Graves and, surprisingly, District Attorney Reynolds himself, a tall, severe man whose reputation for incorruptibility had made him few friends in the city's power structure. "Victor Rossi," Reynolds acknowledged, his tone neutral as he surveyed the scene. "And Mrs. Rossi, this is quite the situation you've created. This is quite the trafficking operation we've exposed," Elena corrected smoothly. With a key witness ready to testify, she gestured to Claire Bennett, who was now being attended to by a paramedic. Reynolds' eyes narrowed slightly. "And I'm supposed to ignore the evident gunfire, the armed men, the fact that you've essentially conducted a private raid on this property. You might consider it a citizen's arrest," Marcus suggested, stepping forward, "of individuals engaged in human trafficking, corruption, and attempted murder." The district attorney was not amused. "That's quite a generous interpretation, Mr. Balliet." "Graves, perhaps this will help clarify things," Isabella Moretti announced from the doorway, where she stood supported by a cane, her injuries still evident but her determination undiminished. She handed Reynolds a thick folder. "Detailed evidence connecting Judge Malcolm Hawthorne, Damian Fletcher, and Rafael Castillo to a trafficking operation that has exploited orphaned and vulnerable children for over 2 decades. Reynolds leafed through the documents, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is extensive and complete," Isabella added. "Financial records, witness statements, documentation of children processed through the system. Everything you need to bring down not just these men, but the entire network." Reynolds looked up, his gaze moving between Victor and Elena. "And what do you want in exchange for this evidence?" "Justice," Elena replied simply. "And immunity," Isabella added with professional precision, "for Victor Rossi and his organization, in exchange for their cooperation in dismantling the trafficking network." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Immunity for a known criminal organization? That's quite an ask, Ms. Moretti. Without their cooperation, without the risks they took, this evidence would never have come to light," Isabella countered. "They've done what law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't do for decades." The district attorney considered this, his gaze returning to Victor. "And you, Mr. Rossi, are you prepared to testify against Hawthorne, Fletcher, and Castillo, to provide complete transparency about their operations and your knowledge of them?" Victor moved to stand beside Elena's wheelchair, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "I am," he confirmed, "with one condition." "You're hardly in a position to set conditions," Reynolds pointed out dryly. "My condition is this," Victor continued undeterred. "When this is over, when Hawthorne, Fletcher, and Castillo have been prosecuted, the children rescued from their network are placed in proper homes, not back into a system that failed them in the first place." The request surprised Reynolds, though he masked it quickly. "That's not typically within my purview." "Make it your purview," Elena suggested. "These children have suffered enough. They deserve more than to become statistics in another broken system." Something shifted in Reynolds's expression. Respect, perhaps, or simply recognition that he was dealing with more than common criminals. "I'll see what can be arranged," he conceded. "Now, I believe all of you require medical attention. We can discuss the details of our arrangement once statements have been taken and injuries addressed." As paramedics entered to treat the wounded, Elena finally allowed herself to acknowledge the exhaustion and tension that had sustained her through the confrontation. Victor knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "You came for me," he said softly, wonder in his voice despite his injuries. "You faced Castillo, risked everything. Did you expect anything less?" Elena asked, a tired smile touching her lips. Victor shook his head, his eyes conveying what words couldn't: gratitude, love, and a newfound respect that transcended their previous dynamic. This wasn't protector and protected anymore. This was partnership in its truest form. "It's over," Elena whispered. "St. Catherine's, Hawthorne, Fletcher, Castillo, all of it. Not quite over, Victor corrected gently. Castillo escaped. He'll be arrested soon, but the threat remains until then. We'll face it together, Elena said with certainty, as we have everything else. As they were led from St. Catherine's orphanage, the source of so much pain in their childhood, and the site of their most significant victory as adults, Elena felt the weight of history shifting. The cycle of exploitation that had claimed so many children, that had nearly claimed Victor, that might have claimed her, was finally breaking. And in its place, something new was being born, a future neither of them had dared to imagine, built on justice rather than vengeance, partnership rather than protection. 6 months after the events at St. Catherine's orphanage, Elena sat in the sunroom of the Rossi estate, watching autumn leaves drift across the meticulously maintained grounds. The estate had changed, just as they had. More open, less fortress-like, with reduced security and a warmth that had been absent before. The legal aftermath of exposing Hawthorne, Fletcher, and Castillo had been complex, but ultimately successful. With Claire Bennett's testimony and the mountain of evidence Isabella had compiled, all 3 men faced lengthy prison sentences. The trafficking network had been dismantled, the corrupt officials who protected it removed from power. The immunity deal that Reynolds had reluctantly granted Victor had come with strict conditions: complete withdrawal from criminal enterprises, full cooperation with ongoing investigations, and significant financial restitution. It wasn't freedom without cost, but it was a path forward that didn't end behind bars. Nikolai entered the sunroom, moving more slowly these days but with the same dignified bearing. His loyalty during the crisis had elevated him to a new position within the restructured Rossi organization, head of security for their now legitimate business holdings. "Mrs. Rossi," he greeted her formally, though his tone had warmed considerably over the months. "Mr. Rossi asked me to inform you that he's on his way back from the meeting with the foundation board. It went well." The St. Catherine's Children's Foundation had been Elena's creation, an organization dedicated to supporting orphan children, particularly those with disabilities. Funded by the Rossi fortune and housed in the renovated St. Catherine's Orphanage building, it represented the transformation of a place of exploitation into one of healing. "Thank you, Nikolai," Elena replied with a genuine smile. "And how are you feeling today?" The lieutenant shrugged slightly. "Better. The doctors say I should regain full mobility eventually." "I'm glad to hear it," Elena said sincerely. "We need you at full strength for the Foundation's gala next month." Nikolai's scarred face twitched in what might have been a smile. "I never imagined becoming a charity event security coordinator. Life takes strange turns." "Indeed it does," Elena agreed softly. After Nikolai departed, Elena returned to the document she had been reviewing, finalization papers for the adoption of 2 children from the former trafficking network. The process had been lengthy, complicated by their status as key witnesses, but the final approval had finally come through. Michael, the 12-year-old boy Marcus had first traced to Fletcher's construction site, and Sophia, a 9-year-old girl with a condition similar to Elena's own. Both had been rescued during the raids that followed Castillo's arrest. Both had experienced the worst of humanity, and both would now have a home with people who understood their trauma. The sound of a car approaching drew Elena's attention to the window. Victor's vehicle pulled up to the main entrance, and she watched as he emerged, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. Gone was the perpetual vigilance, the constant awareness of threats. In its place was a man who moved with purpose rather than caution. When he entered the sunroom minutes later, his face lit with a smile that still caught her off guard sometimes. Open, unguarded, genuinely happy. "Good news," he announced, crossing to her and pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The Foundation Board approved the expansion. We'll be opening 3 new centers across the state next year." "That's wonderful," Elena said, returning his smile. "And I have news too." She handed him the adoption papers. "It's official. Michael and Sophia will be coming home next week." Victor sat beside her, studying the documents with a mixture of joy and trepidation. "Are we ready for this?" he asked quietly. "Being parents?" Elena took his hand, squeezing it gently. "No one's ever truly ready, but if 2 orphans who survived St. Catherine's can't understand what these children need, who can?" Victor nodded slowly, conviction replacing doubt in his expression. "You're right. We can give them what we never had: safety, understanding, a real home." "Speaking of home," Elena said, her tone shifting to something more serious, "there's something else we need to discuss." Victor's expression grew concerned. "What is it?" Elena handed him another document, this one from her doctor. "It seems our family might be growing even more than we planned." Victor stared at the paper, his eyes widening as he processed its contents. We're pregnant," Elena confirmed, watching his reaction carefully. "About 8 weeks along. The doctor says despite my condition, there's every reason to expect a healthy pregnancy with proper care." For a moment, Victor seemed unable to speak, overwhelmed by the revelation. Then, to Elena's surprise, tears filled his eyes, something she had witnessed only once before, on their wedding day. "A child," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Our child." Elena smiled, her own eyes growing damp. A new beginning, a legacy beyond what either of us imagined. Victor knelt before her wheelchair, his hands gently cradling her still flat stomach. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted. "A family, a future not shaped by the past." "The past shaped us," Elena corrected gently. "But it doesn't have to define our children. They'll know a different world, one where they're valued for who they are, not what they can do or what they look like." Victor looked up at her, wonder and determination mingling in his expression. "I swear to you, Elena, our children, all of them, will never know the fear or abandonment we experienced. They'll be protected, loved, supported in whatever path they choose." "Even if that path isn't what we would choose for them?" Elena asked, thinking of their own journey from orphans to power couple to legitimate community leaders. "Especially then," Victor promised. "They'll have what we never did, the freedom to become whoever they want to be." As Victor held her, their future expanding before them in ways neither could have predicted, Elena thought about the long, improbable path that had brought them to this moment. From abandoned orphans to husband and wife, from a rejected bride and a feared criminal to partners building a legacy of healing rather than harm. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Elena smiled, running her fingers through his hair. "I'm thinking about that day at the church, when you carried me out of my worst moment and into a future I couldn't imagine. I was terrified," Victor admitted with a small laugh. "Certain you'd hate me for the intrusion. Instead, I fell in love with you," Elena said softly. "Not despite who you were, but because of who you could become, who we could become together." Victor rose, pressing a tender kiss to her lips. "And look at us now." As they sat together in the warm autumn light, planning for children who would never know the trauma they had experienced, Elena felt the final pieces of their transformation click into place. The cycle had truly broken. The abandoned orphans had found not just each other, but a purpose larger than themselves. The rejected bride and the feared man had created something neither could have built alone. A legacy of healing, a future of hope, a love that had transformed not just their lives but the lives of countless children who would now have chances they never did. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still challenges, still wounds that would never fully heal. Rafael Castillo remained a fugitive, a loose end that sometimes kept Victor pacing late into the night. The transition to legitimate business had cost them allies and wealth. The immunity deal required constant vigilance and compliance. But sitting there with Victor, carrying their child, preparing to welcome two more into their home, Elena knew with absolute certainty that every struggle had been worth it. Every risk, every confrontation, every painful revelation had led them here, to a place where the rejected bride and the most feared man in the city had created something beautiful from the ashes of their shared trauma. A family, a legacy, a love powerful enough to break cycles of violence and exploitation that had persisted for generations. And in the end, wasn't that the greatest revenge of all? Thank you for joining us for this tale of unexpected love and transformation. Until next time, remember that the heart recognizes what belongs to it, even across decades of separation, even in the most unlikely of places, even in the midst of rejection and fear. For in that recognition lies the potential for the greatest transformations of all.